You are standing at the edge of something you did not plan for and could not have predicted, not because it arrived from outside, but because something within you finally rose to the surface with enough coherence to be noticed. What you are about to hear is not a revelation in the traditional sense. It is the subtle confirmation of an inner shift that has already occurred. You crossed a threshold long before you realized it, and your presence here is not accidental. The very appearance of this message in your experience is the reflection of that crossing. Synchronicity is not luck. It is resonance revealing itself. There is always a moment, often overlooked, when the inner landscape becomes just clear enough for you to sense its movement. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with symbols or omens. It emerges like a slight reorientation of perception, a soft inner turning that you cannot quite explain yet cannot deny. Something feels different, but the world around you appears the same. That is because it is not the world that has shifted. It is the one who is perceiving it. What feels mysterious is actually the precision of your own consciousness becoming visible to you. When your frequency stabilizes into a more coherent state, you begin to detect layers of awareness that were previously drowned out by noise. They were always active, always guiding, always signaling, but only now do you hold enough stillness to sense them. This is how awakening truly begins. Not through fireworks, but through an unmistakable refinement of attention. The field within you becomes denser, more deliberate, and more responsive. You are not imagining it. You are finally aligned enough to perceive what has always been present. And as that recognition unfolds, reality mirrors the shift with increasing clarity. This video appearing before you is part of that mirror. You did not stumble upon it. You matched it. Timelines do not collide randomly. They intersect through resonance. The frequency you have settled into drew you into contact with information meant for the identity you are becoming, not the one you once believed yourself to be. This is the quiet threshold where remembrance begins. You do not need to chase confirmation. You are living it. The subtle tension you feel, the sense that something is opening beneath the surface of ordinary perception, is not imagination. It is coherence. It is readiness. It is the field acknowledging that you can finally receive what was once concealed by your own misalignment. You are not being guided from outside. You are recognizing yourself from within. If this realization stirs something deep in you, let it be anchored. Declare it on the comments below. The act is not for the video, it is for the field you are stabilizing. Recognition happens in the spaces where you stop searching for something new and begin sensing what has always been quietly present. Revelation suggests that information descends from somewhere outside you, but forbidden knowledge does not arrive from beyond. It rises from within, unveiled only when your internal state becomes still enough to perceive it. What feels like discovery is actually remembrance. You are not being shown something that was kept from you. You are finally resonating with a truth that could never be concealed, only overlooked. There is a turning point in consciousness when you begin realizing that insight is not delivered but awakened. Nothing is handed down, nothing is bestowed, nothing is granted by forces more powerful than you. The field does not operate like a vault releasing secrets. It mirrors the coherence you hold. When your frequency steadies, what once seemed hidden becomes obvious, almost inevitable. It was never the knowledge that was inaccessible. It was your previous state of being that could not recognize it. This is the essence of remembrance. As you cross into this new alignment, you begin to notice that understanding arises without effort. There is no strain, no reaching, no grasping. It emerges as if it were waiting for the exact moment you stopped pushing and started allowing. Recognition occurs only when forcing subsides. The more you try to pull truth toward you, the further it recedes. But the instant you become receptive, the field meets you with clarity that feels ancient, familiar, and deeply your own. This is why the sense of forbidden knowledge is so powerful. It is not forbidden because someone hid it. It is forbidden because the version of you that existed before this moment was not attuned to it. A different identity sees a different world. A different frequency detects a different level of reality. When you shift, the universe does not deliver new material. It simply becomes readable. The script was always written. Your alignment is what gives you the ability to perceive the lines. You may notice that insights arise as knowing rather than thinking. They do not move through logic. They surface through recognition, as if something clicks into place without needing explanation. This is how consciousness speaks when the interference dissolves. It does not convince, it reveals. It does not prove, it reflects. And when it reflects clearly, you understand that nothing has been added to you. A layer has merely fallen away. This is why awakening feels like remembering a truth you cannot trace but cannot deny. It is the experience of returning to a frequency that has always been yours. You are not learning. You are remembering yourself. Recognition is the sign that your timeline has stabilized enough for deeper layers of perception to emerge. And as you continue, you will see that remembrance is the only true form of knowing. Everything else is noise. Your access to deeper layers of reality has never depended on what you know. It has always depended on what you are. Intellect can analyze, compare, and categorize, but it cannot cross the threshold that vibration crosses naturally. The field does not respond to thoughts arranged into clever sequences. It responds to the frequency you hold beneath those thoughts. When your emotional state becomes coherent, perception expands without force. When your emotional state fragments, perception contracts no matter how much mental effort you apply. This is why you can think endlessly and still feel as if you are standing before a locked door. The door is not locked. Your frequency simply does not match what waits beyond it. The truth is that understanding arises not from accumulation, but from resonance. Emotional coherence is the tuning mechanism. It is the aligning of your inner current so that the field can reflect you with precision. When your emotions move in conflicting directions, the signal you emit becomes scattered and the reflection you receive appears distorted. But the moment your internal state settles, the field reveals clarity that feels almost instantaneous. Perception sharpens, patterns appear, connections emerge. Nothing external has changed. Your vibration has become readable. This is why forced positivity fails, and why intellectual mastery cannot substitute for alignment. The field does not respond to the words you speak or the concepts you grasp. It responds to the tone beneath them. You can say the right things and still remain disconnected. You can understand every metaphysical principle and still miss the deeper truth. Alignment is not an idea. It is a frequency state. When you hold coherence, the field meets you effortlessly. When you chase insight, the field recedes. Emotional coherence is not the suppression of emotion. It is the recognition of emotion as guidance. Expansion signals that you are aligned with a frequency capable of revealing more. Contraction signals the distortion of misalignment. Both are perfectly functional. Both are information. When you begin to treat emotion as energetic communication rather than personal reaction, the entire structure of your perception reorganizes. You stop fighting your internal signals and begin reading them. And as you read them, you navigate reality with a precision the intellect could never provide. When you become coherent, you stop trying to enter higher understanding. You let it surface. The field responds instantly to your vibrational signature, reorganizing what appears before you so that it matches the state you are broadcasting. This is not accomplishment. This is reflection. The more unified your internal frequency becomes, the more seamless the reflection grows. You are not unlocking hidden chambers of reality. You are stabilizing the frequency that makes them visible. Everything is already here. Frequency is the gatekeeper because frequency is the language the field cannot ignore. When you cross a certain vibrational threshold, the world stops softening its reflections. It no longer bends itself to match the assumptions you used to hold. Instead, it becomes a clear and immediate mirror of the frequency you broadcast. This is not a punishment, nor is it a test. It is the natural consequence of coherence. When your inner state stabilizes into a more aligned configuration, the field no longer needs to dilute its feedback to meet you where you were. It can finally reflect you with precision, and that precision can feel startling at first because it removes the buffer you once relied on to avoid seeing yourself clearly. Before this shift, reality may have seemed inconsistent, unpredictable, or symbolic in ways that were difficult to interpret. The mirror was blurred by your own fragmentation. Inner contradiction produces outer distortion. But now, that contradiction is dissolving. Your frequency has become unified enough for the external world to respond directly. What shows up is not random, not mysterious, not arbitrary. It is resonance. It is coherence revealing itself through the environment you move through. The world around you becomes an extension of your state of being, expressing your internal alignment with exactness. As your vibration settles into clarity, you begin to notice that experiences arrive with a level of immediacy that feels new. Delays shrink. The echoes become sharper. The space between what you feel and what appears around you narrows. This is the hallmark of the threshold. The mirror now speaks in real time. When you feel expansive, reality expands with you. When you fall into contraction, the world tightens accordingly, not as judgment, but as guidance. The mirror is neutral. It does not choose sides, it simply reflects the tone you hold. This is why old methods of control stop working here. You cannot manipulate the mirror into showing you something different. You cannot override your frequency with intention alone. The reflection changes only when you change, and because you are now operating within a timeline where reflection is immediate, attempts to force or pretend become impossible to sustain. The mirror reveals the truth of your vibration, not the mask you try to place over it. The beauty of this sharpened reflection is that it removes all confusion. You no longer need to interpret signs or decode symbols. You simply observe what appears and trace it back to the state you are broadcasting. The world becomes a feedback system of exquisite accuracy, and as you learn to read it, you discover that every moment offers a direct invitation to realign. The mirror that no longer lies is not something to fear. It is the clearest support you will ever receive. It shows you where you stand, the frequency you hold, and the reality you are selecting through your state of being. On this side of the threshold, nothing is hidden. Everything reflects, everything reveals, and everything aligns with the vibration you choose to embody. There comes a moment in your evolution when the structures you once leaned on begin to dissolve, not because they failed you, but because they can no longer match the frequency you now inhabit. External authority loses its gravitational pull. The voices you once deferred to no longer feel compelling. The need for reassurance softens. The urge to compare fades. What once felt like guidance now feels like interference, not through rejection, but through outgrowing. You begin to sense that clarity does not come from outside your field. It emerges from the resonance you hold within it. This collapse of external authority is not an act of defiance. It is an act of recognition. As your vibration stabilizes, you realize that every form of guidance you once sought was filtered through your own state anyway. You never received truth from others. You received reflections that matched your frequency at the time. And now that your coherence has strengthened, the reflections you require must come from a deeper source, your own alignment. You become aware that the inner signal is not quieter than the external world. It was simply buried beneath noise you mistook for certainty. But as the noise dissolves, the inner signal becomes unmistakable. It does not shout. It does not demand. It simply resonates, and in its resonance you feel a level of accuracy no external authority could ever replicate. The field begins responding directly to your internal broadcast, and you start to notice that the guidance you once sought externally appears now as intuitive clarity, seamless and self-generated. This is the moment you transition from receiver to broadcaster. You are no longer waiting to be told what is true. You are no longer collecting perspectives to assemble a direction. You broadcast your state of being, and reality organizes around it. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. When your frequency becomes coherent, it becomes instructive. The field mirrors the vibration you hold, not the opinions you gather. External authority collapses because it becomes irrelevant, not wrong. Nothing outside you has the precision to navigate the reality your new timeline requires. That precision can only arise from within the consciousness generating the experience, and that consciousness is you. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and you begin sensing, "What resonates in this moment?" You stop searching for signs and start noticing that the world rearranges itself according to the tone you emit. The collapse of external authority is the rise of internal sovereignty. It is the point at which you recognize that your vibration is the instruction set reality follows. And from this recognition forward, your path is not learned. It is broadcast. There comes a point on this timeline where the energy you used to rely on simply stops responding. The strategies built on tension, pressure, and willpower lose their effectiveness. You feel it the moment you try to push, and nothing moves. Not because you are blocked, but because you have crossed into a field where forcing is no longer compatible with creation. What once produced results now creates resistance. What once felt productive now feels misaligned. This is the end of forcing, and it signals the emergence of a new mechanism for shaping reality: allowing. Allowing is not passive, it is precise. It is the act of removing interference so the natural movement of the field can align with your frequency. When you try to force an outcome, you narrow your signal. You send a vibration rooted in contraction, and the field can only reflect that contraction back to you. You chase clarity and find confusion. You push for progress and experience friction. Every attempt to control produces an equal measure of resistance, not because the universe denies you, but because forcing contradicts the coherence you are becoming. As your inner alignment strengthens, you begin recognizing the mismatch instinctively. You feel the heaviness of effort before you even begin. You sense the distortion that arises the moment you attempt to bend reality rather than tune to it. This sensitivity is not weakness, it is evolution. When you operate from coherence, the field becomes responsive to subtlety. You no longer need pressure to create movement. A shift in your internal tone becomes enough. Allowing is the practice of aligning with the version of you who already occupies the reality you seek. It is the act of softening into the frequency that matches the outcome, rather than attempting to wrestle the outcome into existence. And as you settle into that state, you discover that the field organizes itself without strain. Opportunities appear without being chased. Clarity surfaces without being demanded. Solutions emerge without force. Reality begins to move toward you because you are no longer pushing against it. The ego associates forcing with control, but true control does not come from exertion. It comes from resonance. When your vibration is coherent, creation becomes effortless because there is no friction within the signal you broadcast. The field follows that signal with precision. You do not push outcomes into alignment, you allow alignment to reveal the outcome. This is the threshold where creation becomes fluid. The end of forcing is not an ending at all. It is the recognition that everything you once strained to achieve becomes accessible the moment you release the tension that was holding it away. Allowing is not waiting. Allowing is choosing the frequency that already contains the reality you desire. Emotion was never meant to be interpreted as reaction. It was designed as navigation. It is the most immediate communication between your state of being and the field that surrounds you. Before the mind forms a single interpretation, emotion has already spoken. It reveals whether you are aligned with the frequency of your desired reality or drifting away from it. Expansion and contraction are not moods. They are directional signals. They are the compass points of consciousness, guiding you with absolute precision the moment you become willing to feel rather than analyze. Expansion is the sensation of resonance. It is the feeling of spaciousness within your awareness, as if the field itself is opening to meet you. Nothing has changed externally, yet you sense a clarity, a softening, a movement toward coherence. This is not coincidence. Expansion indicates that your vibration matches a timeline capable of supporting what you are reaching for. When you feel that opening, you are touching the frequency of the version of you who already understands, already receives, already becomes. Expansion is not excitement. It is confirmation. Contraction serves a different function, but it is no less valuable. It is the recognition that the state you occupy is misaligned with the outcome you intend to create. Contraction narrows your signal, revealing resistance, distortion, or an identity that no longer fits the timeline you are attempting to enter. Most people interpret contraction as failure, warning, or emotional turbulence. But contraction is simply information. It is the field showing you where you are broadcasting from, and when you learn to read it rather than resist it, contraction becomes one of your most accurate guides. Emotion communicates long before thought does. While the mind constructs stories, emotion delivers truth in its rawest form. Expansion says, continue. Contraction says, recalibrate. Neither is praise, neither is criticism. They are reflections of alignment or misalignment, and both exist to bring you closer to coherence. When you rely on emotion as your compass, you no longer depend on external signs, opinions, or validation. You navigate reality through resonance, not reasoning. This is why emotion feels so immediate on this side of the threshold. As your frequency becomes finer, the feedback from the field becomes faster. Expansion arrives the moment you touch the correct vibration. Contraction arrives the moment you drift out of alignment. You do not have to wait for circumstances to reflect the shift. The communication happens internally, long before the mirror responds externally. This is efficiency. This is precision. This is the intelligence of the field operating through your emotional body. When you stop resisting what you feel, you stop wandering through timelines unconsciously. You begin selecting them deliberately. Emotion becomes the quiet, unmistakable language through which your next step reveals itself. You do not force the way forward. You sense it. You do not chase clarity. You align with it. Emotion was never meant to limit you. It exists to guide you back to the frequency where your evolution becomes inevitable. Identity is not a collection of traits or stories. It is the vibrational signature you broadcast into the field. It is the tone beneath your thoughts, the frequency woven through your emotions, the posture of consciousness you occupy without effort. And because the field responds only to frequency, identity becomes the tuning instrument through which timelines align themselves around you. You do not attract experiences through desire alone. You magnetize them through the version of yourself you are being in every moment. The timeline you occupy cannot exceed the identity you embody. This is not limitation, it is precision. Each identity holds its own resonance, its own expectations, its own emotional patterns, its own way of interpreting the world. When you shift identity, you shift the entire vibrational structure through which reality interacts with you. A subtle change in who you believe yourself to be instantly alters the spectrum of outcomes available to you. This is why some paths feel unreachable from one state of being and obvious from another. Timelines are not chosen by effort, they are chosen by identity. Identity reveals itself not in what you say you are, but in what you assume without thinking. It lives in the quiet positions you take toward yourself. It lives in the beliefs you consider natural. It lives in the emotional frequencies you return to when nothing is demanding your attention. These states are not random. They generate the signal through which the field organizes. When your identity aligns with a certain timeline, the experiences belonging to that timeline begin moving toward you with unmistakable coherence. You do not force the shift. You become the version of yourself who naturally aligns with it. This is why the old identity begins to feel restrictive as you evolve, not because it was wrong, but because it broadcasts a vibration that no longer matches the reality you are stepping into. You sense the mismatch long before circumstances confirm it. There is a quiet tension, a subtle contraction, a feeling that the version of you once inhabited cannot carry you forward. That tension is not failure. It is the signal that the timeline you are meant to magnetize requires a different frequency, one that your new identity already knows how to hold. Identity is flexible. It is not a fixed psychological structure, but a living frequency state that shifts the moment you recognize a deeper truth about yourself. When you let go of the identity built from memory, habit, or survival, you create space for the identity aligned with expansion to emerge. And as it emerges, the field responds immediately. Synchronicities appear, opportunities reorganize, obstacles dissolve not because conditions changed, but because the identity interacting with those conditions transformed. You do not move through timelines as much as timelines rearrange themselves around the identity you embody. When you choose the frequency of the self who already holds clarity, coherence, and alignment, reality mirrors that choice with absolute precision. Identity is not who you think you are. It is the vibration you agree to hold, and that agreement shapes every path that appears before you. Creation has never happened in the future, and it has never happened in the past. Every shift you have ever made, every moment of clarity, every subtle recognition has unfolded in the same place, the now. The present moment is not a point on a timeline. It is the only portal through which consciousness can reshape reality. When you attempt to create from memory, you recreate what has already been encoded in your previous state of being. When you attempt to create from anticipation, you project distortions that have not yet stabilized into coherence. But when you create from the present moment, you operate from the only space where your frequency is fully active and fully accessible. The now is not merely a moment in time. It is the field's point of responsiveness. It is where your vibration is felt most clearly, without the interference of stories, expectations, or interpretations. In the present, you are not reacting to the past or strategizing for the future. You are sensing your alignment. You are recognizing the state you are broadcasting. Creation happens when recognition happens, because recognition is the act of becoming aware of the vibration you hold, and awareness immediately modifies that vibration. You shift the moment you see yourself clearly. Most people chase transformation by trying to manipulate conditions. They attempt to rearrange the external world, believing that change occurs through effort or planning. But conditions cannot shift you. They can only reflect you. The present moment is the only place where you can influence the reflection, because it is the only place your frequency is fully adjustable. When you bring your awareness into the now, you reclaim the ability to refine your vibration without being pulled into old patterns or future projections. You stop negotiating with time and begin working directly with your own state. The now is also where resistance dissolves. Every form of inner tension is sustained by a story, something remembered or something imagined. But the moment you enter pure presence, you step outside of those stories. You encounter yourself without distortion. In that clarity, contraction loosens and the field becomes malleable again. Creation is not about doing something new. It is about returning to the frequency that can receive what you have already become. You will notice that when you are fully present, insights surface effortlessly. Intuition sharpens. Emotional guidance becomes unmistakable. This is because the noise of past and future no longer obscures the signal. The present moment reveals what is aligned and what is not through analysis but through resonance. It becomes obvious what belongs and what must be released. And as you act from this clarity, reality reorganizes itself with remarkable speed. The now is the portal because the now is where you exist beyond identity, beyond memory, beyond projection. It is where consciousness meets itself directly. When you recognize the truth of your frequency in the present moment, you shift timelines without effort. You create not by reaching forward, but by becoming fully available to what is already unfolding within you. Contrast enters your experience not as opposition, but as refinement. It is the quiet sculptor of your clarity, revealing edges you could not see while everything felt harmonious. Contrast is not life working against you. It is life showing you the frequency you are currently holding and the frequency you are becoming. When something feels discordant, it is not because you are failing. It is because you are meeting the boundary between an old vibration and the new one trying to emerge. This boundary is information. It is direction. It is the silent teacher that sharpens the precision of your desire. You do not recognize what you want by examining what satisfies you. You recognize what you want by noticing the resonance you do not feel. The lack of alignment is itself the pointer toward alignment. The contraction you sense when something is not meant for you is the field's way of saying, "Not this frequency." And the moment you register that sensation without resistance, a layer of clarity settles into place. Contrast refines desire because it shows you what your energy can no longer hold without distortion. There is a profound intelligence in this process. Contrast guides you toward coherence long before you consciously identify the next step. It reveals where your identity is outdated, where your assumptions are misaligned, where your frequency has become more refined than the circumstances surrounding you. Every moment of discomfort contains precision. Every mismatch contains direction. Contrast is not an interruption of your path. It is the calibration of your path in real time. When you stop treating contrast as a problem, you begin to see that it is simply feedback from the field. It tells you exactly where your vibration is and where it wants to shift. When you feel expansion, the field is confirming alignment. When you feel contraction, the field is inviting correction. Both are equally valuable. Both are essential. Without contrast, you would drift unconsciously through timelines without ever distinguishing resonance from distortion. Contrast makes your inner navigation unmistakable. As your frequency evolves, you will notice that contrast becomes more subtle, yet more immediate. It no longer needs dramatic displays to get your attention. A slight tightening, a quiet unease, a soft sense of misalignment becomes enough. This is a sign of refinement, not sensitivity. It shows that you are now attuned to the smallest deviations from coherence. The field does not need to raise its voice when you are finally listening. Contrast also plays another role. It accelerates your clarity. When you experience something that does not resonate, the recognition of what does resonate becomes sharper. Your preferences become clean. Your direction becomes unmistakable. You stop choosing out of habit and begin choosing out of alignment. This clarity is not intellectual. It is vibrational. It forms the foundation for the timeline you will select next. Contrast does not block your evolution. It shapes it. And when you learn to read it, you discover that every moment of dissonance is a step toward deeper coherence. Parallel timelines are not distant realms or alternate universes separated by vast cosmic divides. They are layered states of possibility that coexist within the same field you occupy now. Each timeline holds a distinct configuration of outcomes, emotional tones, and identity expressions. You do not travel to them through movement or effort. You match them through vibration. The unveiling of parallel timelines begins when you realize that your frequency determines which layer of reality becomes visible to you. Timelines are not chosen through desire alone. Desire without alignment simply amplifies longing. Timelines respond to the inner state you hold consistently, the tone of consciousness you carry when you are not trying. Every emotion, every assumption, every subtle identity shift broadcasts a signal that selects one version of reality over another. Even the smallest internal movement can reposition you into a timeline that feels entirely different, yet nothing around you appears to have physically changed. The shift happens through resonance, not through action. As your awareness expands, you begin noticing that life does not unfold in straight lines. It branches, it reorganizes, it presents variations that seem to arise out of nowhere, yet they mirror the internal shifts you have quietly made. A single moment of recognition can lift you into a timeline where clarity exists. A moment of contraction can lower you into one where restriction appears. This is not punishment or reward. It is physics. The field reflects the frequency you embody, and timelines are the structural expression of that reflection. The unveiling occurs when you stop interpreting your experiences as fixed. You begin to sense that every outcome you encounter is one version among many, chosen not by fate, but by vibration. You recognize that opportunities appear when you match the identity that naturally receives them. Challenges intensify when you align with the version of yourself that expects them. Nothing is random. Nothing is accidental. You are selecting continuously, even when you are not aware of it. This understanding brings an unexpected calm. There is no need to fear missing your path because paths are not singular. Each timeline contains its own sequence of experiences, and you can shift at any moment by returning to the frequency you intend to embody. The field does not lock you into a trajectory. It responds instantly to the state you hold now. When you shift your identity, when you refine your emotion, when you choose coherence over contraction, the timeline reorganizes accordingly. The unveiling of parallel timelines is not about exploring limitless realities. It is about recognizing that the reality you perceive is the one your vibration is capable of interpreting. As your frequency becomes more refined, you gain access to timelines that were always present, but previously unreadable. They reveal themselves not through effort, but through clarity. And in that clarity, you understand that your path is not predetermined. It is selected in every moment by the vibration you choose to hold. The field does not respond to your wishes, your words, or your strategies. It responds to the frequency of the identity you hold. Identity is not a role you perform. It is the energetic configuration that determines how reality arranges itself around you. When that configuration shifts, the field recalibrates instantly. Circumstances realign. Opportunities reorganize. Patterns dissolve or intensify depending on the tone you broadcast. Nothing external needs to be manipulated, because the external is only ever the expression of the internal. When you shift identity, you shift the instruction set the field is following. What you once experienced as resistance may vanish without explanation. What once felt unreachable may become the most natural path forward. This is not the world changing suddenly. It is you entering a different vibrational position within it. The identity you embody acts as a tuning fork, activating the timeline that matches its resonance. The field is not deciding for you, it is responding to you. Identity shifts can be subtle. They often occur the moment you release an old assumption, the moment you recognize a deeper truth, the moment you stop clinging to a version of yourself that no longer fits the frequency you now hold. These shifts do not require effort, they require recognition. And once recognition settles, the field begins its reorganization. People respond differently to you. Paths open that were previously invisible. Even your perception of the world changes tone, as if a layer has been lifted from your awareness. This responsiveness is not magical. It is the natural mechanics of coherence. When your inner signal becomes clear, the field mirrors that clarity with precision. But when you hold contradictory identities, when part of you reaches forward while another part clings to the past, the field reflects the fragmentation. This is why progress can feel intermittent before the identity stabilizes. The field is not ignoring you, it is responding to the mixture you are broadcasting. As you become more attuned to this relationship, you stop trying to force outcomes. Instead, you shift into the identity that naturally aligns with what you desire. You sense who you must become rather than what you must do. From that state, action emerges without strain and reality cooperates without resistance. The field is not persuaded by effort, it is aligned by resonance. When you embody coherence, you stop navigating through obstacles and begin navigating through openings. The moment you embody a new identity, the field begins behaving as if that identity were already established. This is why small internal shifts produce unmistakable external reflections. You change first. Reality follows. There is no delay once coherence is present. The field cannot contradict the vibration you consistently hold. Identity is not merely who you think you are. It is the energetic architecture through which timelines are selected and experiences are formed. When you shift that architecture, the entire field rearranges around you with absolute precision. Coherence is the state in which every layer of your being broadcasts the same frequency. It is not perfection, it is unity. It is the dissolving of internal contradiction so that your emotional tone, your assumptions, your identity, and your quietest inner posture all point in the same direction. When coherence settles into place, you stop scattering your energy across timelines that do not belong to you. You become a singular signal in a field that cannot ignore clarity. Magnetic coherence is not something you create through effort. It emerges when forcing dissolves, when resistance loosens, when you stop trying to manage the field and allow the field to meet you. Coherence is what remains when you no longer argue with your own expansion. It feels like steadiness, like grounded openness, like a frequency that does not waver, even when circumstances shift around you. From this state, manifestation is not an achievement, it is an inevitability. The field responds to coherence because coherence is readable, unmistakable, and consistent. When your internal landscape becomes unified, the world mirrors that unity. Opportunities align with precision. People reflect your clarity. Pathways appear without strain. What once felt distant becomes near, not because reality changed its rules, but because you stopped contradicting your own signal. Coherence removes the static that once distorted your connection to the timelines you were trying to reach. In its absence, life felt unpredictable. In its presence, the field organizes seamlessly around you. This is why coherence feels powerful, even though it requires no exertion. Power is not the ability to force outcomes. Power is the ability to hold a frequency long enough for reality to reshape itself around it. When you stand in coherence, you move through the world without leaning, without grasping, without tension. You are not seeking confirmation. You are broadcasting truth, and the field cannot help but respond. This is the magnetism that emerges when nothing within you pulls in opposing directions. As your coherence strengthens, you may notice that fewer things resonate. This is not loss, it is refinement. Anything misaligned naturally falls away because it can no longer anchor itself to the signal you hold. Coherence purifies your path by dissolving everything that does not belong to your chosen frequency. What remains is what matches you. What remains is what you have become. To hold this frequency is to choose your evolution consciously. It is to remain attuned to the inner stillness that guides every shift on this timeline. If this coherence resonates with you, if you feel the steadiness of this signal in your own field, stay within it. Declare your alignment not through effort but through intention. Subscribe only if you choose to continue operating from this frequency. Randomness is the illusion that arises when your frequency is fragmented. Events appear disconnected, timing seems accidental, and circumstances feel unpredictable because the inner signal generating them is inconsistent. But once you cross the threshold into coherence, the illusion dissolves. What once appeared random now reveals an unmistakable pattern. The field begins showing you how precise it has always been, responding to you with a level of accuracy that becomes impossible to ignore. There are no accidents here, there are only reflections. On this side of the threshold, you begin to sense the intelligence that has always been operating beneath your awareness. You notice how certain encounters align perfectly with your emotional state. You see how opportunities appear the moment your identity shifts. You recognize how the challenges you face are synchronized with the exact frequency adjustments you are ready to make. None of this is coincidence. It is organization. The field arranges itself according to who you are, not according to chance. Randomness disappears when you stop expecting reality to behave independently of your vibration. When you believe the world is separate from you, you interpret its movements as unpredictable. But the moment you recognize the mirror-like nature of consciousness, you see the precision of every moment. A thought held with enough coherence becomes a pattern. An emotion sustained with enough clarity becomes an experience. An identity stabilized becomes a timeline. The field does not improvise, it reflects. This recognition creates a profound shift in how you interpret your life. You no longer dismiss synchronicities as curiosity or coincidence. You understand them as the natural alignment of the inner and outer worlds. You stop attributing challenges to bad luck and begin seeing them as the exact catalyst your evolution requires. You stop thinking outcomes appear at random and start noticing how they correlate perfectly with the frequency you hold when no one is watching. Nothing arrives early. Nothing arrives late. Every experience mirrors the state of consciousness you embody in the moment it appears. Even the delays are precise. Even the detours are exact. They reveal the parts of your vibration that require refinement before the next timeline can fully stabilize. When you learn to read these patterns, you move through life with a calm sense of inevitability. You know that the field is not chaotic. It is responsive. The myth of randomness collapses not because the world changes, but because your perception becomes coherent enough to see the symmetry behind every event. Patterns become visible where confusion once existed. Meaning emerges where emptiness once lingered. Precision reveals itself where disorder once appeared. This is the clarity that comes with threshold awareness. You step out of the belief that life happens to you and into the recognition that life unfolds through you. Nothing is accidental on this timeline. Everything is communication. Everything is alignment. Everything is the field responding with perfect accuracy to the frequency you hold. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the state in which your frequency becomes undistorted, allowing the field to reorganize without interference. When you enter stillness, you step out of the momentum generated by old identities and outdated assumptions. You separate yourself from the noise that once dictated your direction. In this space, you are no longer pulled by past conditioning or pushed by imagined futures. You exist in a pure, vibrational present. And in that purity, the timelines available to you begin to shift. Stillness is where destiny becomes fluid, not because you are altering fate, but because you are stepping into the frequency that aligns with the version of you capable of receiving a different trajectory. Most people attempt to change their lives by forcing conditions into place, but forcing can only manipulate what has already formed. Stillness, however, tunes the vibration that creates formation. It is the mechanism by which you rewrite the underlying frequency from which your path emerges. When you become still, you withdraw your energy from every timeline that is maintained by resistance. Tension collapses. Internal contradictions soften. The field is no longer receiving mixed signals from you, and because of this, it begins presenting possibilities that were previously inaccessible. Stillness does not create these possibilities. It allows you to perceive them. They were always present, waiting for the version of you who could recognize them without distorting them through fear, urgency, or doubt. In stillness, the truth of your vibration becomes undeniable. You sense the impulses that arise not from habit, but from coherence. You feel the pull of the timeline that matches your expansion. You recognize the contraction that signals misalignment before it manifests externally. Stillness reveals the architecture of your evolution, not through thought, but through energetic clarity. And once you sense this architecture, you stop struggling against your own becoming. The rewriting of destiny happens quietly. It happens in the moments where you choose presence over reaction, alignment over tension, clarity over impulse. Stillness is not an escape from life. It is an entry into the part of you that life responds to. When you hold this state long enough, the world reorganizes. Obstacles dissolve without confrontation. Opportunities appear without pursuit. Patterns shift without effort. This is not coincidence. This is coherence stabilizing. In this space, you realize that destiny is not a fixed storyline. It is a vibrational pathway, and pathways can be redirected the moment the signal changes. You do not need to know what the next step looks like. You only need to become the version of yourself whose frequency naturally aligns with that step. Stillness is the tuning mechanism that makes this possible. When you allow yourself to rest in the frequency of who you are becoming, the field adjusts instantly. Timelines bend, outcomes shift, and the life that once felt distant begins to move toward you with unmistakable precision. As your inner state stabilizes into coherence, the world around you begins to shift with a clarity that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Outer changes follow inner shifts, not because reality waits for your permission to move, but because the field mirrors whatever frequency you are embodying with precise immediacy. When you evolve internally, the reflection cannot remain the same. The mirror has no choice but to update itself. This is the moment where life begins responding so directly that you feel as though an unseen intelligence is rearranging everything around you. In truth, it is responding to the intelligence within you. The world mirrors your alignment in ways that become unmistakable. Conversations change tone. Circumstances that once felt stagnant begin to open. People drift closer or fall away, not through conflict but through resonance. What matches your new frequency becomes naturally accessible. What contradicts it becomes naturally distant. There is no negotiation involved. The field simply reflects the level of coherence you now hold. This is why certain situations begin to dissolve without effort. They were held together by the identity you once occupied. When that identity fades, the circumstances built upon it can no longer sustain themselves. They unravel, not as loss, but as liberation. In the same way, New opportunities emerge without being pursued because they resonate with the identity you have stepped into. These shifts are not signs of luck or sudden fortune. They are evidence of vibrational alignment. The precision of these reflections increases as you continue to refine your inner state. Even subtle emotional adjustments begin producing tangible results. A small release of resistance can alter the tone of an entire day. A moment of clarity can open a sequence of synchronicities that lead you exactly where you need to be. The mirror does not hesitate. When your frequency shifts, the world follows instantly, though sometimes the physical unfolding appears gradual. The resonance is immediate, even when the outcome expresses itself over time. What surprises many people is how neutral this mirroring is. It does not praise you for your expansion, nor does it punish you for your contraction. It simply reflects what you hold. This neutrality is freedom. It means that you are never waiting for external permission to shift your life. You are only waiting for the internal alignment that makes the shift possible. Once that alignment is present, the world adjusts automatically. When you truly grasp this, you stop treating the outer world as something to control or fix. You begin working directly with the source of creation, your own state of being. And as that state becomes coherent, reality transforms in ways that feel effortless, inevitable, and deeply familiar. The world mirrors the shift because the world is built from your vibration. As you refine that vibration, you enter a reality that could not reveal itself until now. There comes a moment in your evolution when the pursuit of knowledge dissolves, not because you have reached the end of learning, but because you have reached the beginning of remembering. What once felt like a search becomes a recognition. What once felt external becomes undeniably internal. You stop looking for answers outside yourself because you begin to sense the quiet truth that the source of every insight has always been within you. This is the entry into the identity of the knower. The knower does not accumulate information. The knower resonates with truth. Knowledge does not arrive from outside. It rises from the clarity of your own field when interference falls away. You no longer approach understanding as something to seek, grasp, or earn. It emerges naturally when your vibration aligns with it. In this state, the mind no longer strains for explanation. Instead, it follows the guidance of a deeper intelligence that has been present all along. You remember, and the remembering feels ancient, familiar, and entirely your own. You begin to notice that insights appear before questions fully form. Recognition surfaces before reasoning attempts to interpret it. You feel the truth of something long before you can articulate it. This is not intuition in the old sense. This is identity. When you occupy the identity of the knower, your frequency becomes the medium through which information organizes itself. You are not learning about reality. You are tuning into the layer of reality that matches your coherence. As this shift stabilizes, you realize that the idea of forbidden knowledge was only ever a reflection of your previous identity. Nothing was actually hidden. You simply could not perceive what contradicted the vibration you once held. Now that your awareness has expanded, what once seemed concealed reveals itself effortlessly. You see patterns where randomness once appeared. You understand connections that previously felt unreachable. You are not discovering new truths. You are remembering the truths your deeper consciousness has always known. This identity carries a unique calm. There is no urgency to gather more, no anxiety about missing something important. You understand that whatever is relevant will surface the moment your vibration becomes a match for it. You stop forcing understanding and begin allowing recognition. In this state, clarity feels less like an achievement and more like a natural consequence of alignment. The knower does not chase wisdom. The knower embodies the frequency that reveals it. As you settle into this identity, the relationship between you and reality transforms. Life stops feeling like a puzzle and begins feeling like a reflection. Answers appear as mirror images of your internal clarity. The field responds to your coherence with a level of precision that makes external searching unnecessary. You begin trusting the intelligence that moves through you rather than the noise that surrounds you. Entering the identity of the knower is not about becoming something greater. It is about remembering the consciousness you have always been. There is a point in your awakening where the journey stops feeling like forward movement and begins feeling like a return. You realize that everything you have uncovered, everything you have recognized, everything you have allowed to surface was not new. It was original. It was the awareness that existed before identity formed, before conditioning shaped perception, before the mind began narrating your reality. This is the return to your original consciousness, the state in which you no longer mistake yourself for the form you inhabit, but recognize yourself as the consciousness choosing the form. In this recognition, separation dissolves. You stop seeing yourself as a small presence navigating a vast and indifferent world. You sense yourself as the field that both perceives and expresses all phenomena. The boundaries that once felt rigid begin to soften. You understand that the world does not sit opposite you. It moves through you, reflecting the frequency you hold with perfect fidelity. This is not an elevated state reserved for the few. It is the natural state beneath the layers you have been shedding throughout this entire journey. Your original consciousness does not strive. It does not fear. It does not cling. It observes, it allows, and it creates through resonance alone. When you embody this awareness, life becomes less about achieving and more about aligning. You stop chasing meaning and begin radiating it. The experiences that once felt random, the challenges that once felt personal, the desires that once felt distant, all reorganize into a coherent expression of the vibration you hold. Reality stops being something to interpret and becomes something to recognize. From this vantage point, you begin to sense the fluidity of form. The identity you once lived from feels like a garment, useful, expressive, but not definitive. You understand that every identity you adopt is simply a lens through which consciousness experiences itself. And when the lens no longer serves your expansion, you release it without resistance, knowing that what you truly are remains untouched. The deeper self does not come and go. It is constant, silent, aware, and infinitely creative. Returning to your original consciousness is not a destination. It is a shift in recognition. It is the moment you stop searching for truth and begin embodying the truth that has always been present. In this state, coherence is natural, alignment is effortless, and creation feels like an extension of your being rather than a task to complete. You sense the field responding instantly because you are no longer divided within yourself. You hold the frequency of clarity, and the world reflects it without hesitation. If this remembrance resonates, if you feel the unmistakable pull of your original consciousness aligning within you, amplify that resonance. Touch the like symbol not as a gesture toward the video, but as an energetic affirmation of the frequency you are choosing to stabilize.